What screams I've never been poor to you? I grew up in a family so poor we used to buy whole milk and then pour half of the gallon into the empty container and water them both up to make skim, and it was bad. I've been broke many times, but I'll never be poor. Seeing people hustle always makes me support them in some way. The biggest giveaway for me now that I can code switch top to bottom of the wealth scale and back again is the complete ignorance of the plight of anyone serving them. Like it costs you none of your millions to be a nice person. But so many are stingy with empathy, or they have just never had it or been taught it. Every single tick-tick homesteading queen who judges every mom who doesn't live their exact life. You vaccinate. No wonder your kids can't read on grade level. Why do you other women bother having kids if you were just going to have someone else raise them? Homeschool them. You ever think autism might come from all the chemicals in your store-bought bread? All natural and all homemade for my fam. Fuck every single one of you stuck up, ignorant, privileged conspiracy theory-loving bitches. I hope you choke on your pretentious organic pickled duck eggs. An in-law of my dad came from wealth throws everything away. Dad bought $150 worth of decorations for his granddaughter. Dad didn't know they already had decorations. Dad says to just save them for next year. In-law throws them all out. Brand new stuff. Throws away day-old leftovers because they're in his way he's not going to eat them. Throws away screwdrivers, phone chargers, kitchen utensils. Uses 15 paper towels to wipe up a drop of water. Opens all the windows while it's 90 outside the AC is running. Never shuts off a light. He has no concept of money. Had a girl in a graduate college class freak out that I'd never flown, and I was about 23 at the time. I forget how it came up, but we were in a group project and I mentioned how I'd never flown. She straight up got super offended and accused me of being dishonest about it. After her bullshit tirade ended, I asked her how many of her flights to the Caribbean, Middle East, Europe, etc. she'd paid for herself, and she shut up. I told her I thought so. Sounds like the Bank of Why? And I never heard shit from her about it again. I knew someone who worked with wealthy people, and there was a clear divide between new money and old money. New money would show off their designer purse, and wouldn't let it out of their sight for fear it would be stolen. Old money would have the same purse, but they weren't defined by it. They'd leave it behind and come back for it. They'd spill something on it and laugh. Something that really screams I've never been poor are those who aren't fussy about their stuff because they're so comfortable with replacing it. Telling people that buying Starbucks and eating avocado toast is the reason they don't have any money. Look, not saying that SB and fancy toast aren't items that you could definitely do without in order to save a few bucks, but when you're poor and struggling your way through life, being able to get yourself a Starbucks a couple of days a week really can save your sanity. Nothing more depressing than working your butt off and being a responsible adult, but not even being able to splurge on a treat for yourself. Ling, my then boyfriend, now ex-husband, that I've missed meals before due to not being able to afford food, and he said, I know what you mean. I chose not to eat during my finals once so I could study. Lamau Bro grew up rich, and the anger I had for him that day. I grew up below the poverty line. Went without meals some days because we couldn't afford to eat. Never knew where my next meal would come from. He seriously thought he could relate because he chose not to eat one time so he could study. When I was in college, I explained to my friend that my mum joined a cult and drained my bank account I had still been paying into a joint account she'd created when I was in middle school. My dad was in rehab for the second time that year. Told my friend, whose parents were an entertainment law attorney and a documentary journalist. Their response, well, we all have a budget. I work overnights to cover living expenses. Your parents give you a spending allowance so you can have fun. We are not the same. Australia, I didn't know how much tolls cost until Google Maps updated to include them in the route info. My only memory of how much they cost was under $2. When you had to stop at physical toll booths on the harbour bridge and put coins in. The reason I didn't know was I just have any tag toll thing in my car connected to my parents' account. I'm less spoiled now though, they insist on me keeping the tag. So I just never use tolls unless it's going to force me to be late to something important. Had a conversation recently about needing dental wear, but not being able to afford it. Some guy kept insisting, I know it's a lot of money, but it's necessary. Once you get out of the dentist, you'll be glad you went. No amount of explanation would get through. He kept assuming I had the money. I just didn't want to spend it. I couldn't get him to understand why I don't physically have that amount of money. When I'm done at the dentist, they are going to expect payment, which I don't have. Someone who thinks that frugal poor. My mum and brother both think that we were poor growing up because we wore hand-me-downs and didn't go on vacation much. We had a 3-bedroom renovated farmhouse, always to vehicles, never out of food, never without heat or electricity. Nice furniture. Appliances got fixed or replaced as needed. We were firmly middle class. Now that I'm older and have been actually poor for my whole adult life, it feels ridiculous to think that we ever were growing up. I had a co-worker at a part-time job constantly talk about how he doesn't need the job. His parents paid for everything for him. They even bought him a brand new Tesla. SRE. It's not even that much more expensive than economy. Renting is so expensive. My dad's just going to buy me a house, and after I'm done school and go back to my hometown, we can just sell it. I'm reminded of Ken Lay's wife after Enron collapsed, and one of the reasons people were angry at them was because they kept telling employees to buy stock when they knew it was collapsing. So many people lost their retirement money, and they were angry. Ken Lay's wife in an interview said people had to understand they were also suffering because they were down to $31 million. Yes, million. While their employees were finding out retirement was no longer an option. My sister makes over $100K a year. So does her spouse. My partner and I, however, make less than $100K together. When she found out we were looking into moving, she kept sending me places that were way over our monthly budget for rent. It didn't matter how many different ways I told her it was too expensive, or what our max was. She'd just come back at me with, you just need to learn to budget. You can't budget your way out of money you don't have. I used to be friends with a guy who was rich, but was self-conscious about us making fun of him for it. One time he was telling a story and trying to paint himself as someone who worked for everything he had. I said, like that Rolex. He got really defensive and said it was a gift from his dad after he finished boarding school in Switzerland. He had zero awareness. At boarding school in Switzerland wasn't something regular people do. Here's a friend describe a problem that only money will solve, with a pep talk about how they need to swallow their pride and ask their parents for help, because no decent parent who loves their child would let them be in that situation. You have to tell them. Then if you say something like, the same parents who asked me for money yesterday, those parents, they don't believe stuff like that happens. When I was in middle school, I had a friend over one Saturday. My mother gave us a snack and chatted with us in the kitchen for a few minutes, then excused herself to use the bathroom. Maybe half an hour later, my friend asked where the bathroom was, and I pointed it out. She said, but I thought that was your mother's bathroom. She was genuinely surprised that each family member didn't have their own bathroom. Went to high school in a really wealthy area. I was not one of the wealthy kids. Grew up really poor. This one guy in my class asked me where I got some stickers I had on one of my notebooks. I told him the Dollar Tree, and he gave me the most confused look and seriously said, what's a Dollar Tree? He had never been in or heard of Dollar Tree or similar stores. Was in awe. I was once friends with someone who told me the minimum wage is more than enough for people to live off of. Everyone who says you can't is just being lazy. Sure man, because your $60,000 job that your family set you up for without any effort on your end and living rent-free is something that happens for everyone. I wasn't friends with them for much longer after that. In my very poor county school, we were discussing deals at Goodwill. My teacher, who married into old money, commented, I just couldn't imagine owning something somebody else already owned, which seemed not only electors considering half the calls couldn't afford school lunch and the fact I'm sure her house was full of antiques which are all things previously owned. I have a wealthy friend who comes from money. Also made a shit ton of money himself. When he got a big payout over $50 million, he said to me drunk one night, It's not all about money, man. You need to stop working so hard and putting so much pressure on yourself. I just said it's easy to say that when you literally never have to worry about the cost of anything. Ever. My college food budget was $3 a day at one point. Difficult even by 90s standards. So one afternoon I was eating my bagel and yogurt lunch on the quad and Prince Philippe of Spain landed his helicopter right in the middle of the square. He's now king of Spain. So I would say, getting dropped off at school by helicopter said a lot about our financial differences. It's only $100. Why did you slide down the hill like that? The first thing you learn when skiing is how to fall properly FFS. You've only visited 3 states, but you are almost 20. Can't you just ask your parents to co-sign your lease? Aren't your parents buying you a computer? Why do you go to the campus computer lab so often? You're just now getting a passport. I dated a wealthy woman, and at one point she bought a nice piece of art. She said she was going to call her handyman to hang it. I'd seen his work and he was ripping her off, so I was like, let's do it together. So I show her how to hang something secure and level, and at the end of it she was angry. Because doing things for yourself is what poor people do. My cousin who recommended this great watch, such good value, and I lost my watch at her family reunion. Looked in line. Thing cost $5,000 for a watch that she recommended to me as a good value. Her dad was from Hura family, but he made dollar on Wall Street. And she married a wealthy guy. She has so lost touch with middle and middle class members of the family.